Welcome to the Focus Farm webinar, monthly webinar, everyone. This over the last month, we've obviously had Christmas and New Year, which has been fantastic. But we've also transitioned back to 10 and 7 milking regime, which has been good. The cows have been, at the end of December, they were doing around 1.83, and they've dropped back to about 1.75 over the last 2 weeks, which is kind of in line with a normal transition time, which I think Jeremy will go through shortly. In terms of the issues that we're facing on the farm, the cows are in reasonably good condition. I condition scored them 4 weeks ago, and they were about 4.65 across the whole herd, and then they got split into young and light cows. There was one herd that was 650, and then another herd of 500 that were the fatter, older cows. Taking the cows back to from 3 herds to 2 herds, which has just given us a little bit of extra time during milking, but it's created a few extra headaches for me just doing allocations and having cows crossing over as they leave the dairy. We've finished making silage. The grass is growing reasonably well. It's very interesting. We'll discuss it shortly, but the plate meter is telling me that we've been growing at about 80 kilos a day for the last 3 weeks. However, our pasture cover hasn't moved in line with the difference between supply and demand. So there's a few interesting things going on related to, the plants being at the reproductive phase and things like that, which I think we'll discuss shortly. The other thing I'm finding with 10 in 7 is it's been great with the staff. Just, they're only needing to do 2 milkings on a weekend. So it's staff are getting more weekends off, which is good, and people are getting more time away. One of the main reasons we went to it is, I guess, with this wave of Omicron coming through the country, I was conscious that we were going to have staff off at various times due to isolation or coming down with COVID. We have a staff member at the moment who's actually got COVID. They got COVID while they're on holiday, so they're not at work this week. And it's nice, just that we're not having to everyone, do massive hours to cover up. So that's working quite nicely. The other thing I'm finding is with 10 in 7 is with our pasture allocation, we're moving cows on as they need it, and we're getting more time during the day to do that. It does mean that there's a few later night moves, which is keeping things entertaining. But it is interesting that our round length has been 22 days pretty consistently through spring and up to the end of December. In the last 2 weeks, our round length has dropped to 18 days. Now, this is just mainly happening because we're moving the cows on as they need it, and I'm finding that the cows, they're needing it. So that's probably related to the issues that we're just having with our pasture walks, and maybe we're overestimating how much is in the paddocks. But the cows are definitely drilling paddocks quite nicely, so that's working well. We're still topping a few paddocks as needed and pre-mowing some paddocks, which is working well. Our heifer calves have just gone off on adjustment today, and they average 145 kilos. And our R2s, we've just taken back 200 of our heaviest R2s, and across the whole 330, they average 410 kilos, which we're very happy with. So those heaviest girls will now just come home and work their way around our dryland corners that have really got quite a big body of feed on them. That's not fantastic quality, but hopefully for them, the hard work has been done in terms of getting weight into them. We're just coming towards the end of joining. I am quite nervous about what our results are going to be like, but bulls will be coming out at the end of this week, and we'll be pre-testing. I'm not going to pre-test until the end of February. So that's what's been going on around the farm, and I'm really keen to pull some more grain out, but just given the round length is shorter than what it should be, the cows are needing more feed. I'm pretty nervous at the moment to be making any drastic changes with grain. In fact, I've thought about putting in a little bit of silage to try to push that round out, just given that what's happening on the ground isn't actually reflecting what is happening on the plate meter. So handing over to Jeremy and Richard to give some more insight or ask some questions.
Yeah, Thanks, James. Fire away, Jeremy.
Yeah, actually, first question, James, a bit of a challenge to work out how much grain is going in. Is that 3 kilos based on the old traditional 1.5 kilos milking, which is only 2 kilos a day on average now, or?
No, so I just, it's 70% of the daily intake. So I just, multiplied the whole lot, then, yeah. So.
But hey, I mean, that's certainly a challenge with 10 and 7 is keeping abreast of just what supplements are going in, and you've nailed it then. Yes, you've got to work on 70% because that's how many milkings you're doing a week.
Yeah.
Interesting. On the FarmMax model, James, you're doing 1.84 in the last 10 days of December, 1.74 now. That's bang on a 5% drop. And the research from Dairy NZ that was done here in Canterbury on good high performing cows was 5%. So you're spot on in line with what we'd expect with a drop going on 10 and 7. So that's pretty encouraging, and getting all the savings and labour, and so it's kicking quite well. It's and you're quite right. It's a bit of a headache there in terms of your feed wedge. Your demand's been sitting at 50 kilos a day for the last 2 weeks. As you pointed out, your growth rate colour hasn't changed. So this just highlights why you do need to interrogate your farm management software, whether you're using AgriNet or FarmIQ or any of the other sort of software options available, because they don't always tell the truth. There can be other anomalies in there as well. You can see James is on the numbers there that AgriNet shows that most of those pigs are genuinely 17-18 days since they were last grazed. So just a good case example is don't always believe the numbers. The cows will tell you exactly what is going on. So I do share your scepticism, James, around being too aggressive at cutting some feed out. Comfortable with the covers where they're at, but in terms of the way that feed wedge is showing up, but we just need to get on top of just what is going on around those pre-grazings. You mentioned before, James, that the seed head may be keeping the plate meter up a bit.
Yeah, I've definitely noticed that over the last few weeks. I mean, I think we're through that phase now. Most of the farm is sown down to barely. We also got quite dry there over Christmas, so even under pivot. So I think the plants are under a fair bit of stress. So I think that was definitely pushing up the pre-grazing. But now I think we're through that. We've had 40 mils of rain in the last week, which has just been fantastic. I also put on 10 tonnes of urea last week just to catch up. I was noticing that it appeared that the plants just didn't have any guts in them. And whilst they were growing quite nicely, just the appearance and the way the leaves were, I guess I just thought I'd needed to really get things going. So put some urea on, and I guess we're probably seeing the benefits of that. So it'll be interesting to see how the paddocks play out over the next week or so.
The other thing I noticed too, one of the tools you have on AgriNet is being able to compare your farm with other farms using AgriNet around you. Won't mention name, James, but I did notice last week a lot of the other farms on your AgriNet group were doing 50, and you were standing out at doing 70s and 80s. So maybe their 50s might be a bit more common.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, like we haven't grown it. We're at 70 today, and I guess if we just look back at last week, I'm assuming you can see this on your screen.
Yep.
But if you look back at last week, we're at 81. But our covers dropped by 50 kilos across the 8 days, and our demand's only 51 kilos. So what's happening is not indicative of what's showing on this screen, I guess.
James, I reckon, sorry, I was just going to say, if you look at the pre-graze covers on that wedge on that week, they're pretty much 20 days since grown, and they're well over 3,000. We're getting 3.2, which sort of supports that, if they've come off a base of sort of 1,600, they've grown 1,500 plus in 20 days, which is 75 plus. So that looks okay. If you go to the wedge for this week, you don't see that same. And I'm just wondering, whether there was a period there where, you know, it got dry and then you've had some rain and you've just picked up that bounce that it's occurred. But over the whole 20 days, the actual growth is more likely around that 55 to 60, because those paddocks that are going to be around 20 days don't look like they're going to be above 3,000 on that wedge.
Yeah.
And so I just wonder whether you've picked up a bounce in response to rain, but over the whole regrowth cycle and across there, we're not actually seeing that 70 kilos that you're measuring this week on those paddocks that are bounced. They're probably compensating for a bit of growth they missed out on with a moisture stress all the time before, because certainly the pre-graze covers there don't look like they do on the previous wedge.
So, yeah. And I think some of those pre-graze covers on the week before were getting pushed up by seed head, but I guess I think this week we're probably not seeing it quite as much.
Yeah. So Jeremy, you think, you know, in terms of trusting the farm walk and what's done, the key figure there is the overall change in cover from week to week and then what the cows are doing?
Yeah, absolutely. The fact that it hasn't changed, that rotation weeks, 18 days is still quick enough. 18, 19, I would treat this with a little bit of suspicion, but keep a blooming close eye on it, because, and that round length on a daily basis, because if you find your round lengths pushing out to 22, 23 days, with that bouncing growth that you're referring to, Richard, then you need to watch out, because you could end up with too much grass before you know it. Yeah. So if you end up in that scenario, James, with if this feed wedge was looking correct and you're out to 22, 23 days, 3,000, are you prepared to ease on the grain at the moment?
Oh yeah, definitely. Yeah. I mean, that's the goal at the moment. I guess I'm just very nervous to be doing it at the moment, given that we have been doing 10-7 for 2 weeks now, 12 days or something like that. But I'm just feeling like they're still in transition. They're still producing really well. And so I don't really want to be making drastic changes to the detriment of their production. Once that round length pushes out a bit, naturally will push itself out a bit, then I'm more than happy to do it. So I mean, I have considered putting, I guess a question for you, Jeremy and Richard, is, what should my round lengths, if we just project ourselves forward 2 weeks, we're at the end of January, what should my round length target be?
When your demand's around 50, your current demand's 50, and if you didn't have any grain in there at all, you'd have a demand at the moment about 62. While you're sitting with a demand matching potential growth, you can afford to sort of be playing with round lengths around that 21 to 24 days. And that's going to be from now through to 1st of March, 10th of March, where you've got growth rate potential of sort of 58, 60 kilos. So while you're sitting, I mean, you've got to be careful you don't go too early, because if you end up building up too much cover, you'll lose your quality, and your cows are still susceptible to quality at the moment, especially when you're doing 1.74. So while we're sitting in that situation, just hold your ground when you're on an irrigated farm. If you're on a dryland farm and your growth rates are starting to drop and you're going to struggle to recover, then absolutely wind out your round. And bearing in mind, you can change your round length very, very quickly if you need to. So if you're get to the 20th of February and run out of water, you come under irrigation restrictions, and your growth rates drop to 20, then all you got to do is add 4 or 5 kilos of supplement, and overnight your round can come out by 10, 15 days if you need to. But at this stage, James, I'll be sitting on that 20 to 24 day round range.
Yeah, sure. It's interesting, going back to your question around supplement, there's been a nagging voice in the back of my mind and back of my head over the last few months that, we're down on last year's production. I think our cows are on track. Last year they did about 485 kilos a cow, and I think this year it's probably going to be closer to 460. And I think there are a few seasonal reasons for that Richard may go into. I think a lot of people are experiencing the same thing, but it's perverse that you end up chasing last year's production. And so I think that's one of the reasons why we've probably used more supplement than what we should have and cut more silage than what we should have, because we were chasing last year's production. when in fact we should just get our heads around managing for the season. I mean, if you told a cropper that from 1 year to the next year, production risk was going to be 5% of yield, they'd probably jump at it. So that's been it's been a really interesting learning experience over the last, few months, I think, for sure.
And you're doing exactly the same per cow production as you're doing this time last year too, James.
Yeah.
Yeah, you did 1.76 last January on average on FarmX. So I think that per cow production story you're talking about, I agree with you. It is going to be back. But that's also around lactation rather than how well your cows are milking on any given day. So yeah, we missed a bit in the spring, and sort of a few more cows in December as well. So it's actually your average lactation length that's probably knocking around your per cow production rather than your lactation curve.
Yeah, no, I agree with that. And we talked about total milking cow days, James, and in terms of cow numbers as well. The other bit, as far as you mentioned there, across the season, we know particularly in the northwest, it was quite wet through spring, and so utilisation of pasture's been down quite a bit. There are, I think when we look across the district through the spring, we were down on sunlight hours quite a bit as well. So the solar radiation that we received was down, and then I think the autumn was quite dry, and so whether people probably didn't get as great a result this year with adjustment that they got in previous years because the autumn, whether that's heifers coming back a little bit lighter than they thought, or dry cows, mature cows coming back a little bit underdone in comparison to the year before. I think all those factors sort of contribute across the board, and we have seen you see the dairy Australia figures for the state coming across. There's a decline for the whole state at this point in time, and I think there's a combination of factors in that. The other bit mentioned, James, is the allocation and the round lengths at the moment going to 10 and 7. Did you just want to work through how you actually calculate that? Is that based on a weekly hectare, weekly total of hectares used, and then looking at what the round has been for the week, and then just how you're managing, particularly say your short interval on your 10 and 7, and how you're managing residuals, and then maybe get Jeremy to also compare what's happening in New Zealand around how people manage residuals and work out their rounds for the week.
Sure. So I guess I'm really good at overcomplicating things. So I did done a spreadsheet that just tells me how many hectares I need to give each herd. So I can just change the cow numbers here. Well, we're doing 1150. We've bumped up to 355 hectares, and we're on a 21-day round. And then it just changes how many hectares I need to give each herd based on the hours that are in that milking interval. But in reality, I'm probably going at an 18-day round. So I'm using about 20 hectares a day. In terms of how it actually works on the ground, you can see here that, there's this big herd. There are quite a few feeds here that are, 10 hectares, and we actually don't have the paddock sizes that are 10 hectares. So there's a bit of juggling that needs to go on. And it's very interesting. Some farms are good at splitting herds, whereas I find it far simpler just to put cows in a paddock and then move them when they need to be moved. The challenge with that is that I drive a white ute, and so whenever the cows see my white ute, they come expecting a move. So I almost need to go and check them in a Can-Am in a different coloured vehicle to check what the residuals are like before I move them. So that's something that we're working through at the moment. What I am doing is that basically I'm looking at this sheet to work out how many hectares they need. And if it's going to be line ball, or if I'm a little bit short, I'll just make sure that I've got enough time to go and move them at some point. So, but I'm also trying to keep a pretty close eye on them throughout the day, but just keeping up in my mind just an idea of exactly where they are. But then in terms of how our round length is actually going and how things are looking, I'm really having to rely on the shorter feeds. So, a 4 hectare feed where I can actually give them that 4.3 hectares. I can work out exactly how much was in there, and then I can actually just work back and see, are they hitting their residual target at that, or are they not? And if they are hitting their residual target or they're going too hard and I need to move them on, well, I know my round length is shortening. But if I'm having to put them back onto that 4 hectares, then I know that my round length is lengthening. And previously, when I was doing 12-hour breaks, I was getting that feedback, effectively 6 times a day, because it was 3 herds and 2 breaks a day. Whereas at the moment, I'm probably only getting that feedback once every 2 or 3 days. So that's probably been a bit of a change. I'm also finding that it's much easier to send cows back to do a cleanup job on a long feed rather than a short feed, where cups on in the morning at 5:30 and then in the afternoon at 2:30. So that second herd, you're probably going to get them at around 4 o'clock in the afternoon, but they may not actually all of them hit the paddock and you lock them away until, 10:30 in the morning. And so they're only getting 6 hours in the paddock. So if you need to move them, you're not really giving them, if you're wanting to get 10 kilos into them and you're wanting them to clean up a paddock by eating 3 kilos, you probably don't have a huge amount of time for them to then go and eat that, however many kilos, 5 to 7 kilos in that next paddock. So that's just what I find. And I would love to get to the point where I could put certain numbers of cows in the paddock to clean up it, but I just think that complexity is the enemy of execution. So I try to keep it simple for the staff and just make it complex or onerous for me instead.
Yeah, that's good. Jeremy, in New Zealand, how's the 10 and 7 going, and maybe comparisons in 3 and 2, and maybe James's experiences there also?
In terms of feed allocation, most people actually just stuck to how they're doing it before when they're on twice a day milking, where they give them 20% of the 80%, 70 to 80% of the break at night, and we'll give them a 30% break during the day. So quite often shifting cows sort of either side of morning milking, usually just after morning milking, and giving them a short break during the day and a big break at night. So that allocation of feed under the 10 and 7 is very similar to twice a day milking, but that second shift is just we're getting the timing a bit better right, so we're not having to rely on milking time to do that. So most people give them a shift about 3 or 4 in the afternoon onto their night break. In terms of variable versus 10 and 7, not a lot of difference between them is coming through. Interesting to see that James is just that 5% drop that we were seeing that was done by Dairy NZ Research. That was on a pure variable once a day, twice a day model. And James has achieved the same results as a 5% drop on a 10 and 7 model. So there's one more once a day milking. But it's only every fortnight, the way the maths works out as well. So for my 2 bits worth, I'd go 10 and 7 before variable milking, which is your once a day, twice a day, because as James pointed out before, the people love it. And cows get used to it pretty quick as well. And there's very minimal impact in terms of your bottom line and profitability. So that the pros outweigh the cons.
Great, good. And James, I know it was down there just before Christmas, just keeping up with the water, but what sort of rainfall have you had over the Christmas New Year period, and how that sort of responded to growth? They had probably a pivot down there that's somewhat under-specced and was struggling to keep up, but the others were, there was quite a bit of difference in the growth under, those pivots that the system capacity was a fair bit higher.
Yeah, no, we definitely had one pivot that's been giving us a fair bit of trouble this year. So growth under it, and it's probably our best performing grass. So that's been a bit of a challenge leading into this rain, but fortunately we had 40 mil. I think December was November and December were very, very dry. I don't have the exacts, but it was definitely pretty dry. And then, we've been fortunate to get that 40 mils last week. Really caught up. And the 2 of our most I've just started irrigation now just to make sure to find a leak. So yeah, would prefer to.
I think we lost a bit of James's connection there, Jeremy, but we've got the gist of it. I think, yeah, he certainly, the rain certainly helped get a bit of a bounce and a growth, particularly under that pivot that was struggling there. But yeah, just as far as where people have been, I know that December got pretty dry for everyone. And yeah, just that system of capacity to keep up was pretty tough going. But I imagine the rainfalls that did fell across the state over the Christmas New Year period were somewhat quite welcome to help get the profile back where it needs to be. And I think you're right, Jeremy, as far as people looking at the rounds and seeing where they're at the moment, yeah, if you're getting that growth rate response, then yeah, being able to stay on a shorter round. But if you have got dry land systems or moisture deficits across, you know, being able to respond and push around out and being proactive about that as well. So, yep. Yeah, you manage the situation, don't let the season manage you, I suppose. Yep. Yep. That's great. And feed quality, James, still, like I know you did quite a bit of silage making and topping, and yeah, how's it holding up? You seen the benefits of that, or you're still struggling a little bit with seed emergence and the like?
I think we're through seed emergence, Richard. But yeah, I mean, it's been quite problematic. I mean, we made a fair bit of silage. We've topped a lot for quantity, I reckon, early in the season. And then we've ended up topping again for seed emergence at this time of the year. So that's been a bit of a challenge, but I guess just one of those things. Yep. It's the way the season's been.
Yep, for sure. Very good. And how's the season in New Zealand, Jeremy, just to finish up with?
Ordinary.
Ordinary.
Yeah, very ordinary. Yeah, I think our most of New Zealand's sort of back about 2 to 3%. And December was really ordinary for Canterbury. Our cows dropped 8%. And no rhyme or reason, we had plenty of grass, but we just nutritional properties of grass just weren't quite up there with it. So quite low sugar levels, a lot of overcast weather, and hot, muggy, overcast weather. So our cows are, we won't have very many herds in our 60 farms that we monitor that break 500 kilos a cow, probably down to, normally would have 5 to 10 herds. This year we're only looking at 2. Yep. So yeah.
So most of those farms are regularly feed testing their pastures, or is that the service that's provided across the district? Or
no, we just had a couple of farmers trying to work out what on earth was going on. Yep. And the big challenge for us here too is just our inflation rate. Trying to make money. I mean, great having a good payout, enjoying that, but our nitrogen price has doubled. Grain prices going up. Adjustment has gone up by 10%. So we're probably looking at about another 5 to 10% lift in cost of production over here. So that's pretty sobering. It's okay when the payout's good, but we are losing a bit of resilience in our pasture-based systems over here as well. Yep. Or any feed system.
How do you mitigate that, Jeremy?
Yeah, interesting one, James. We've the marginal milk is costing us about $8 a kilo milk solids to make over here. So that's including cow costs and grazing costs. So I think less is more in terms of less production can potentially mean more in profitability and resilience as well. The labour one's interesting. We've had probably 5 to 10% lift in labour, especially at the dairy assistant end of things, in our milk harvesters. So we're looking at adoption of technology, collars, as ways of easing labour demand, and looking at variable milking as well. So 10 and 7, and what ways can we cut back on our labour demand? Hence, sure you drop your milk production, but can you drop your demand on labour and demand on inputs even faster as well? So hence my comment, maybe less production, a little bit less production might mean a bit more in terms of profitability and resilience as well.
One thing that's interesting, Jeremy, is the Lincoln 6-week in calf rate was lower this year. interesting. Would you would expect a better result with 10 in 7?
Yeah, that'd be a fair comment. So it's just come in at 68%. Typically, we've been 71, 72%. So yeah, it's a fair comment, James. We're anticipating a bit better than that. So it'll be interesting to see what our final result is. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. And by all rights, it should be better.
Yeah.
Good. All right. No further questions. I think that's a wrap for this month. Thanks, Jeremy. Thanks, James. Very comprehensive, and we look forward to catching up next month and see where things have got to, and probably have some of those mating results in from your farm as well, James, to discuss next time. So
yeah.
right.
Thanks.
Terrific.